I'm Pastor Jeremy Combs, and we're going to meet the Majesty in Matthew. This is our 15-minute Bible study, only once a week, but what a difference we're making. Here we are in chapter 10, over a third of the way done with the book. Well, chapter 10, we ended chapter 9 with pray ye therefore the Lord of the harvest that he would send forth laborers, and now we get to see those laborers initially going forth. And we're specifically designating the 12. It says that when he called into him the 12 disciples. Again, this is Matthew 10 and verse 1. So all of the Bible isn't written to us, but it is written for us. Say, Pastor, yes, you need to understand that. We go to the Old Testament. The Bible is written for the nation of Israel. Obviously, I'm not a Jew, and probably a lot of you watching this are not Jewish. And so technically, it wasn't written to you, but it's always written for us, for our understanding, for us to learn and to know God more. And so chapter 10 is unique in the fact of Jesus is addressing his 12, and they've got a specific opportunity, a specific mission, and that is they're going to go to the Jews alone. They're not going to go to the Gentiles. They're not going to go to any of the Samaritans. You say, well, and then sometimes what happens is we take the Bible out of context and we say, well, this is what, the Bible is exclusively for the Jewish people. Well, no, the Bible opens it up, and it's also for the Gentiles and the Samaritans. And so we need to understand that some of these principles in here were specifically given, and we'll explain this as we unearth or as we roll this thing out. But we also need to understand that as well, that this is specifically for the apostles as they're going forth and as they are spreading and announcing the king has come. And so we'll get into that. We also get into the selection of the disciples. Let's look at it. Verse 1, and when he called unto him the 12 disciples, he gave them power against unclean spirits to cast them out, to heal all manners of sickness and all manners of diseases. Does God still do the miraculous? Well, the obvious conclusion to that is yes, absolutely. But does he do miracles? Well, I'd be real hesitant. I think he does, and I think he works all around us. And I think about at this time, I have a nephew that's going through cancer treatments, and they did some treatments, and his mash shrunk. And if we're not careful, we chalk that up to the doctors and the treatments, but I chalk it up to one and only one thing, and that is God. Now, does God use the means of doctors? Well, of course he can, and he does, but don't discount the miraculous simply because God is using them. They're going to go forth. Think about it in this vein. The 12 disciples are going to go forth, but they're going to do the miracles. So if the 12 don't go forth, then the miracles will not be demonstrated. And so we look at doctors, we look at other things that happen. Is God still working around us? Well, obviously he is. He answers prayer. He works in miraculous and in many cases mysterious ways. Now, I don't think if someone's out there saying, we're doing these healing services and so forth, I'd be very careful about that, because God's ministry is not for divine healing and casting out of demons, although he can do it. His primary objective is the gospel, and this is where he's going to go with his disciples. Now, the names of the 12 apostles, these is sent ones, are these. The first was Simon, who is called Peter. Now, there is a specific order in how this is laid out. Peter tends to be the spokesman, the leader of these disciples. His surname or original name was Simon. Peter means a rock or a little stone, and I believe Jesus changed his name for that because of the great change that took place in Simon's life, and therefore God gave him a new name. And Peter is one of my favorite characters in the New Testament. And then he had his brother Andrew. Now, Andrew's kind of a behind-the-scenes kind of a guy. He brings Peter to Christ. He brings others. One thing about Andrew is you always find him bringing someone to Christ. And he's only mentioned, I think, specifically 3 times doing something. Remember the feeding of the 5,000? Who's the one that finds the lad? Well, a careful reading, I believe it's in John's gospel, will tell you it was Andrew. When the Greeks come to find Jesus, they go to Philip, and then it is Philip that takes them to Andrew, and then Andrew brings them to Jesus. Other than that, we don't know much about Andrew, but I'll tell you this, if that's all that people knew about our life is that we brought people to the Lord, then boy, wouldn't that be enough? And then it says James, the son of Zebedee. Okay, Zebedee, Of course, is his last name, James, and then in just a moment, and John, his brother. They're called the sons of thunder. That's how Jesus addressed them. Apparently, they were very passionate. Maybe they had a little bit of a short fuse, and so Jesus described them in that venue. We know that James will be the first martyr of the church. That Herod will have him killed, and we know John will be the only one of the 12 that will not be martyred, although he will be dipped in oil. Tradition tells us. We know that he's left on the Isle of Patmos, and of course, he is permitted to survive because he's going to give us the book of Revelation. So this is the first grouping here. You have the first four. You have Peter and Andrew and James and John, and they're the prominent ones of the group. In fact, sometimes they're divided into threes, and if that's the case, then it goes to Peter, James, and John, the Mount of Transfiguration. Some other places where, why did Jesus do that? I don't think he showed how to do favoritism. I think there's a couple of reasons. One, you could look at from the down up, and that is it could be that Peter, James, John, and yes, we'll even throw in Andrew here, wanted it a little bit more. I wish everybody wanted the things of God as much as some people. We have folks even at our church that, man, you say, boy, it seems like they just do everything. And maybe the reason they do everything is that they want it. If you say, hey, we're going to go soul winning, they're there. Hey, we're going to sweep the floor. Hey, they're going to be there. Hey, we're going to, fix the toilet. Hey, they're there. I mean, you can't fault somebody who is just hungry and has an unbelievable desire. Does it make them any better? Not necessarily, although in some ways it does, but it doesn't in value make them better, maybe in their attainment better. And so I think Jesus viewed Peter, James, John, and Andrew as not more valued than the others, but yet recognized that these guys wanted more. And I think if you look at it from the top down, this would be from God's angle, these four men especially are going to be leaders and are going to suffer some pretty horrific things. Peter, of course, is going to lead the early church, as will James. James is going to be martyred. And so God, in his foreknowledge, knows that, and in some ways maybe gives him the best of both as a reward for what he's doing. John, of course, will go through immense suffering and will be the last living apostle to testify of Jesus. And so this would be the first four. Then you get into verse 3, Philip and Bartholomew. We also have Thomas and Matthew the publican. Okay, that's the next four. Philip has some brief appearances. Bartholomew also is in other places can be called Nathan, and we know that these two have some occurrences, one or two, but not much. Of course, Thomas would be noted for his doubting, and that's unfortunate because, again, I think it's three major emphasis on him. One is he says we're going to go back to Lazarus when he's sick, and we will go and die with thee. And then when Jesus says, "I go to prepare a place for you," Thomas says, "We how can we go if we don't have the way?" So some great truths and passion, and yet it's sad that we all remember that unless I put my nail prints in the hands and thrust my hand in the side. But may that be a lesson to all of us that one misstep, one bad decision can be the lasting refrain of our life. And so be careful of that. And then, of course, you got Matthew, who is penning this gospel, and he's penning it, don't forget. And so it would have been really easy to have left out publican, that is tax collector, evil man. But it reminds us that it is God ultimately that is writing the message. And two, the instrument does not want to get in God's way. And, I'm only a sinner, saved by grace. I think it was John Newton that at his death said this, one thing I know, and that is I am a great sinner, and yet he's an amazing God. And something we can all learn from Matthew. And then you get to the last set, James, the son of Alphaeus, James the Less. A lot of folks believe he was a shorter man, and that's why we called him. Jesus called him that. It could be that maybe he wasn't as flamboyant as James, James the son of Zebedee, and so maybe he was lesser of status. We don't know, but we know it wasn't a demeaning thing that Jesus used for him. We know Lebbaeus, whose surname was Thaddeus, and then we have Simon the Canaanite, who's also known as Simon the Zealot. He evidently was a political kind of a guy before Jesus came in, and was just very passionate. And I'm all about politics, but our politics should never replace our gospel. And boy, that's a fine line. You say, I don't know if I can hold the front on both ends. Well, then I'd drop the politics and I would stick with the gospel because that's the main thing. And then the last one would be Judas Iscariot, who now their writing says who also betrayed him. And so he's mentioned among the group, but yet also has that asterisk next to his name. I know one person that was studying this, a man of God, said, I always wondered why Judas Iscariot. Why would God choose Judas? And then he said the real question came into mind that needed to be answered, and that is, why would God choose me? Was Judas meant to disobey? Well, no, really. You look at the overly extended mercies of God. Judas is a classic example of this, that he got what maybe no other person that has ever lived got. He got to walk and talk and fellowship and hear the teachings of Jesus and see the miracles of Jesus for almost 3.5 years. You say, yeah, but wasn't it ordained that he would betray the Lord Jesus Christ? It was ordained. God knew what was going to happen. He knew Judas's wicked heart, and he knew he would be the tool that Satan would use. You say, yeah, but it's almost like God takes Judas's arm and twists it behind his back. I think not so. I think in some ways, if you want to have that analogy, it's almost as if he's twisting his arm behind his back, saying, "Love me, love me, love me, love me." And even when he comes and at the supper before he goes to betray him, Jesus dipped the sop and gave it to Judas. And when we do our walk through Passover supper, we do it about every 4 or 5 years here. We just recently did it. I believe it was last year. I always will humorously take the sop and give it to somebody and tease them and say, that's, it was supposed to be, the sop was supposed to be for the guest of honor. And Jesus chose Judas as the guest of honor at what would be the Last Supper, an extension to say, Judas, you don't have to do this. And then as Judas comes and betrays him with a kiss, Jesus said, "Betrayest thou thy friend with a kiss?" And so really up until the last minute, Jesus extended every opportunity to Judas. And may Judas be a warning to us all that to whom much is given, much is required. Boy, hell is going to be a terrible place for everyone, but I think especially of a man like Judas who walked and talked with God. Boy, how hard-hearted we're also seeing this can mankind be. That you could be in the very presence of a God in the flesh and still reject him. And so I know I was setting up the chapter to get into sending forth, but I look at the time and I look at some of the wonderful lessons in these first 4 verses. And so I think we'll stop here. He chose 12. And the wonderful thing is God has chosen us as well. He's chosen to save us. He wants you to be saved. If you're here and you do not know where you'll spend eternity, you're a sinner, yes. You've broken God's law, yes. You are deserving of his judgment. There's nothing you can do to change that. But before you were ever born, he saw you, he knew you, he loved you, and he came to pay the price for your sin, to die in your place, to take sin's penalty. And if you will call on the name of the Lord and believe on him, he'll save you. And then for those of us that are saved, we're doubly chosen. We are chosen to go and to carry the message and to serve the King of Kings. And so, let me say this: go serve your king. Go and live as a disciple, a follower of Jesus Christ. Live as an apostle. Now, I know there were only 12, but the apostles were ones who were eyewitnesses. Now, we can't be the eyewitnesses of his death, his burial, his resurrection, his ministry, but I think we've all been eyewitnesses of God working in and through our lives and those that are around us. So God chose 12. He wants to choose you. Will you go? Hey, God bless you. We'll get into the instructions for the 12 next time.